Take your shovel and push it into that bare patch in your yard. If the ground pushes back, if the blade meets hard resistance instead of giving way, that soil is telling you something. Push it a little further and turn the dirt over. Look at it. Gray, dry. There is no crumble to it, no softness, no smell. Just powder-packed dirt that sits there without any sign of life. Now dig into a healthy patch somewhere else on your property. The corner of a garden bed that has been mulched for years. A shady strip along a fence that nobody bothers. Notice what happens when the shovel goes in. It gives way. The soil comes up darker. You can smell something alive in it, something faintly earthy, like the ground after rain. And if you look carefully, something is moving in that lifted clump. That difference between the two patches is not about sun exposure. It is not about how much rain one area gets versus another. And it is not about how much fertilizer you have been putting down on it. The difference is what lives underneath the surface. Healthy soil is active soil, the kind that gives you a little resistance at first, but then opens up when the shovel asks it to. The kind that holds its shape loosely instead of falling apart in dry chunks. The kind that smells like something is happening in it because something is. Dead soil does none of those things. When you turn it over and watch it for a moment, nothing moves. No flicker, no texture. No sign that anything is working down there. Just gray, packed, silent ground. Most people who find themselves staring at that soil reach for the same answer. And it helps a little, but not where it matters most. Here is what most people do when the ground looks like that. They go to the hardware store or the garden center. They pick up a bag of fertilizer, maybe a balanced general formula, maybe something for tomatoes or lawn, maybe whatever is on sale. They bring it home, sprinkle the granules across the hard ground, water it in, and wait. And something does happen. The plant may green up a little. New leaves push out. A week or two later, there is visible growth where there was not much before. That looks like progress. That feels like the problem is being handled. But go back 3 or 4 weeks later. Press your palm flat against the soil. It is still firm, still dry between waterings, still cracked at the top where the sun has had its way with it. Dig a few inches down, and the story is the same. Hard, pale, lifeless. Nothing has changed underneath. This is not a failure of the fertilizer. Fertilizer does exactly what it is designed to do. Deliver nutrients the plant can absorb. It feeds the plant from above. It pushes growth. It works at the level of the plant itself. The problem is that feeding the plant is not the same as fixing the soil. The mistake is not using fertilizer. The mistake is stopping there, watching the leaves respond, and concluding that the ground is recovering. It is not. The soil underneath is the same as it was before the bag was opened. And so the next season, you go back for another bag. Because the fix worked on the surface, but left the real problem untouched. Underneath that surface, something important has gone quiet, and a bag of granules, no matter how good the formulation, cannot turn it back on. Healthy soil is not just a growing medium. It is a working system. There are billions of tiny organisms in a single handful of good garden soil, most of them invisible. Bacteria, fungi, tiny invertebrates, all of them breaking down organic material, releasing nutrients in forms plants can use, and building the structure that keeps soil open and breathable. These organisms are not incidental. They are the engine. When the engine runs well, you feel it in the soil. It is crumbly and loose. It holds moisture without becoming waterlogged. It has a faint but distinct earthy smell, and earthworms move freely through it, opening small tunnels and leaving behind castings that enrich whatever surrounds them. Here is where most people misunderstand the earthworm. The earthworm looks like the cause of healthy soil. People buy bags of worms, add them to dead ground, and wait for the soil to improve. But a worm dropped into depleted, compacted, dry ground does not fix it. That worm will leave, or it will not survive, because the conditions are wrong. Earthworms do not improve dead soil. They move into soil that is already improving. They are not the starting point. They are a sign that the conditions are right. When soil loses its organic matter, when the surface is stripped bare, when nothing is added back, when the ground bakes and cracks season after season, the microbial population starts to thin. Less food means fewer organisms. Fewer organisms means less structure, less activity, less of what makes soil worth living in. And when that living layer thins out, the earthworms follow it somewhere else. Not because anything killed them, because the table was cleared. A worm is not the beginning of healthy soil. It is a sign the table has been set. Dead soil has not just lost its nutrients, it has lost its food chain. And fertilizer, as useful as it is at the plant level, does not rebuild a food chain. It skips past the underground system entirely and delivers results right at the surface, which is why the ground stays hard, stays silent, and stays empty, season after season, even when the leaves above it look temporarily healthy. This is where the Japanese approach begins. Not at the plant, at what lives in the ground beneath it. And the surprising part is that the key ingredient is not a fertilizer, not compost, and not something most gardeners think to use. Before explaining how this method works, it is worth being clear about what it is and what it is not, because the title of this video will bring in people with different assumptions. This is not cooked rice scattered across the soil. It is not rice water poured at the base of a plant. Scattering cooked rice on the surface of a garden bed will cause problems before it helps anything. It sits in the heat, begins to rot, and attracts flies, mold, and rodents before it ever reaches the soil below. This is also not an ancient mystical technique. What this is a practical soil-building approach rooted in a real Japanese concept called Bokashi. That word refers to a fermentation process used to prepare organic material before it goes into the soil. It is grounded, practical, and within easy reach of any backyard gardener. The key ingredient is rice bran, not the cooked grain. Rice bran is the thin outer layer stripped away when rice is milled from brown to white. It is a byproduct of that process. Dry, slightly nutty smelling, and in this system treated as a food for the soil, not for the plant above it. The contrast with the fertilizer routine is direct. Fertilizer delivers a fast result because it feeds the plant from above. This method does not target the plant first. It feeds the microbial community underground, the organisms that break down organic material, build soil structure, and create the conditions earthworms follow. The plant benefits eventually, but that is a downstream result of soil recovery, not the goal being targeted. This is not a rice hack. It is a soil feeding system, and there is one step at the center of this system that makes everything work. One step that separates this approach from simply adding organic material to the ground and waiting. That step is fermentation, and it changes everything. Think about the difference between serving a meal raw and serving it already prepared. One takes more work. The same thing happens underground. When dry rice bran or other raw organic material is buried in dead, compacted soil, the remaining microbes have to do all the heavy lifting themselves. In healthy soil, that is not a problem. In depleted soil, it often is. The material sits, or it goes the wrong direction, toward rot, surface mold, or attracting the wrong kind of visitors. Fermentation solves this by starting the breakdown before the material enters the ground. When rice bran is mixed with a small amount of living material, mature compost, or a handful of healthy garden soil from a living corner of your yard, the microbial life in that starter gets to work on the bran immediately. Add a small amount of diluted molasses or brown sugar water to provide a little energy. Seal the mixture in a covered container, and over the next few days the fermentation begins. The bran is partially broken down before it ever goes into the soil. It becomes something the underground community can use right away, without having to struggle through a raw, unprocessed form. You will know the fermentation is working by the smell. Correct fermentation produces a sour, sweet, earthy smell, tangy and controlled, like something specific is happening. It is not a pleasant smell, but it is not a wrong one. If the container smells like garbage, like rot, like a bin that has been sitting in summer heat, stop. That mixture has putrefied instead of fermenting. Do not use it. Start again, and go drier on the moisture level this time. Too much water is almost always the cause. Here is what changes everything. Earthworms do not come for rice. They come for food, moisture, and microbial life. The rice bran is not meant to attract worms directly. It feeds the microbes. The microbes build the organic matter, and when the conditions are right, when the soil is moist, cool, covered, and full of activity, the earthworms know where to go. You are not summoning them. You are setting the table. And when the table is ready, guests arrive. This system works best when you begin with one small test area, not the whole yard, not the entire garden bed. Pick the worst dead patch you have. Starting small keeps the process manageable and gives you something visible to check and compare in the weeks ahead. Step 1. Gather your materials. You need rice bran, available at some feed stores, health food retailers, or online depending on your area. A few handfuls of mature compost or healthy garden soil from somewhere on your property that is already living. A tablespoon or two of molasses or plain brown sugar. Water. a bucket or bag with a lid, a shovel or trowel, mulch or dry leaves to cover the treated area afterward. Nothing here requires a special order or a specialty supplier. Step 2. Mix the rice bran with living material. Combine the rice bran with your compost or healthy soil. The living material is not a filler. It carries the microbial starter that initiates fermentation. Dry rice bran alone is just powder. Combined with something alive, it becomes a working system. Step 3. Add moisture and sweetness. Carefully, dissolve a small amount of molasses or brown sugar in water and add it gradually to the mixture. The target texture is critical here. Grab a handful and squeeze it. It should hold its shape briefly, like a squeezed sponge, and then slowly crumble apart when you open your hand. If water drips out when you squeeze, it is too wet, and too much moisture pushes the fermentation toward rot. Go slowly. Add liquid a little at a time. Step 4. Ferment it covered. Seal the mixture in a bucket or bag and leave it somewhere out of direct sun. Check it after several days. A week or more is common, depending on the temperature and how active your starter material is. When you open it, smell it before doing anything else. Sour, sweet, and earthy means you are ready. A foul, rotten smell means start over. Still smelling like plain bran means seal it back up and give it more time. This waiting step is the one people want to skip. Do not skip it. The fermentation is what makes this system different from simply adding organic material to the ground. Step 5. Bury it. Do not scatter it. The most common application mistake is spreading the fermented mixture across the surface of the soil. Do not do this. Material on the surface is exposed to sun, air, and whatever passes through the garden. It will dry out. It may attract pests. It will not reach the underground community it is designed to feed. Instead, use a shovel or trowel to open small holes or trenches across the test patch, 6 to 8 inches deep, spaced roughly a foot apart. Add the fermented bran into the openings, and cover them back over with the soil you removed. Press the surface down gently. The material is now inside the soil, where organisms can find it without competition from above. Step 6. Cover the soil with mulch or leaves. Even soil that now has fermented bran underneath it will not recover if the surface bakes in the sun. Earthworms need cool, moist conditions near the surface. Lay 2 to 3 inches of dry leaves, straw, or wood chip mulch over the entire treated area. This shades the soil, holds moisture, and begins slowly contributing organic matter as it breaks down. Step 7. Keep the area consistently damp. Water gently, and then make a habit of checking the moisture. The goal is soil that feels cool an inch or two down when you press a finger into it. Not wet and pooling, not dry and pulling away from itself. Earthworms breathe through their skin. When the soil dries out, they move away or go deeper. Consistent moisture is not optional. It is what keeps the system running once it starts. There are a few ways to lose the effort you put into setting this up. The most common misunderstanding comes from the word rice. Some people assume the method involves cooked rice scattered on the soil or poured at the base of a plant. That is not what this is. Cooked rice on the surface does not feed the soil. It sits in the heat, begins to decompose on the surface, and attracts flies, mold, and rodents before it helps anything underground. The method here is rice bran, buried after proper fermentation. That distinction is not a minor detail. It is the difference between the method working and creating a different problem entirely. The second mistake is using a mixture that smells wrong. If the fermentation container smells like garbage or sewage, if it stops you when you open it, do not proceed. That batch has rotted instead of fermenting. The usual cause is too much moisture. Start again, drier this time. The third mistake is expecting visible results quickly. This system is rebuilding something that may have been declining for years. The check you want to do is not looking at the leaves after 1 week. The check is the shovel test. Same patch, 4 to 6 weeks later. What comes up when you push the blade in will tell you more than anything happening above the surface. If you are doing this in the heat of summer, understand that hot, dry conditions will work against the process. Soil that swings between soaked and parched will not hold the stable, moist environment the system needs. Treat summer as a test period on one small patch, mulch it heavily, water consistently, and plan a fuller soil recovery for fall. When the ground is cooling down, when there is no active root pressure, and when the material has months to do its work quietly before spring. Do not apply heavily around plants that are already stressed or recently transplanted. Active fermentation underground generates a small amount of heat and microbial intensity. Established, deep-rooted plants handle this without issue. Young or struggling plants may not. The mistake is not the method. The mistake is rushing it or applying it carelessly. When you compare this to the fertilizer routine, the difference is not just what you spend, it is what you are actually fixing. Think about the fertilizer routine across several seasons. A bag in spring, another one mid-season when the results fade, one more in fall. It is not expensive in any single purchase, but the underlying condition never changes. Every spring the soil is the same as it was the year before, sometimes a little worse, and the bags keep being necessary because nothing about the ground itself has recovered. The fertilizer is not building anything permanent. It is lending the plant something and then asking for it back, season after season. Rice bran is different in almost every way. It is a byproduct of rice milling, what is left over when the outer bran layer is stripped away to produce white rice. It is produced in large quantities and sold at many feed stores, some health food retailers, and through agricultural suppliers. Price and availability vary depending on where you live, so check what is accessible locally. But it is not a premium product. It is a plain material being used for a quiet purpose. The molasses you add is a small amount, a tablespoon in a batch. The compost or soil starter is something most gardeners already have. The bucket is in the garage. The mulch is leaves from the yard. The real investment is time, the several days to a week or more of fermentation, the weeks of maintaining moisture, the patience of waiting for underground conditions to shift. What that investment produces is not temporary. You are not giving the soil something it will use up and need replaced next season. You are rebuilding the conditions that allow it to function on its own, to process organic material, hold moisture, support microbial life, and eventually draw earthworms back, not because something forced them there, but because the conditions gave them a reason to come. Go back to that test patch 6 weeks after applying the method. Take the shovel, push it in, notice what happens. The blade enters easier than it did before. The soil that comes up is darker, not dramatically transformed, but noticeably different from the pale gray powder it was before. There is structure in it, looseness, a faint earthy smell. And if the conditions held, if the mulch stayed in place and the moisture was consistent, you may lift a shovelful and see something moving. Not because you purchased worms, not because you applied something that forces them to appear, because the table was set and life found its way to it. That is the real proof. Not greener leaves, not faster growth above the surface, softer soil underneath it, soil that is becoming something again after a long time of being nothing. The principle here does not need a complicated explanation. Repair the foundation before expecting the structure above it to hold. Restore what the system needs to run on its own before asking it to produce anything. The garden is not an exception to that idea. It is one of the clearest examples of it. Most visible problems in a yard have an invisible cause. The plant that keeps struggling season after season is almost never the problem. It is the last symptom of something that started underground and worked its way up. Treating only the symptom, greening the leaves, boosting growth, does not address what is happening below the surface. And the below-the-surface problem will keep expressing itself, season after season, until the soil itself is given what it actually needs. Dead soil does not need more force. It needs life. And life does not arrive on command. It arrives when the conditions are right. When the ground becomes cool, covered, and full of food, life knows exactly where to go.